My name is Lena, and when I got married, I kept one secret from my husband and his mother. The house we lived in was mine. I thought I was protecting my independence, but what I didn't realize was that I was also protecting my life. Slowly, I uncovered the truth. The man I loved and his mother had planned everything. Our romance, our wedding, even our future, to take from me the one thing I worked so hard for. But I didn't break. I fought back, and I won. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. When I got married, I never told my husband or my mother-in-law that the house we were living in belonged to me. And thank goodness I didn't, because if I had, I would have lost everything the moment the wedding ended. But before I go further, let me ask, do you ever feel like some people don't love you? They just love what they can take from you? If so, keep listening. You may understand me more than you think. I had promised myself once that relationships were distractions. I wanted to focus on my career, my goals, my independence. But that was before Adrian walked into my life, the new head of strategic partnerships in our company. He was tall, with thoughtful brown eyes, and a warm, almost disarming smile. The kind that makes you feel chosen. And I let myself believe I was. I was 27 at the time, already a senior manager handling high-profile accounts. Naturally, I had to work closely with him. One afternoon, after a long client briefing, he looked at me and said, "Lena, you have an instinct for people. Not everyone has that." Then he smiled and added, "How about we go over the new onboarding strategy tonight? Maybe over dinner." I normally avoided mixing business with anything personal, but something in his voice seemed sincere. So I agreed. That dinner stretched late into the night. We barely talked about work. Instead, we talked about our childhoods, our ambitions, our fears. I hadn't felt that comfortable with anyone in years. When he walked me outside and asked where I lived, I hesitated. I had bought my house only a few months earlier, small but warm, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood in Seattle. I had worked tirelessly for it. Late nights, extra freelance contracts, saving every cent. That house was my victory, the proof that I could build a life on my own. But I didn't want him to see it, not then. So I lied. I rent an apartment downtown. I told him. He nodded and said casually, "I'm staying with my mom for now, just until I settle back here. It's temporary." Temporary. I believed him. Our relationship developed fast. Too fast in hindsight. Adrian always knew what to say, what gift to choose, how to apologize before I was even upset. It felt like he anticipated every thought I had. The first time he stayed over, he slowly walked around the living room, his fingertips lightly brushing the furniture, the walls, the shelves. "This place feels familiar. Cozy," he said. Then, with a small laugh, "I bet it wasn't too expensive, right?" My heart paused, just for a beat. Something in his tone caught me off guard. Still, I repeated the lie. "Oh, it's my aunt's place," I said casually. "She's living in Florida now, so she lets me stay here." "You're lucky," he nodded. "Houses like this are worth quite a bit these days." The way he said it made my stomach twist, but I ignored it. Love makes you ignore many things you shouldn't. 2 weeks later, I met his mother, Marisol Hale, a woman who walked like she owned every room she entered. Her stare was sharp, evaluating like she was inspecting something for flaws. She offered me a thin smile. "So this is the woman Adrian has chosen," she said, as if announcing a verdict. Dinner with her felt like sitting through an interview. She asked about my parents, my upbringing, my financial life, my future plans. But the way she asked held a tone I couldn't describe, like she was measuring something only she understood. When Adrian stepped outside for a cigarette, Marisol leaned closer and took my hand lightly. "Lena, I see you're modest. sensible, the kind of woman who doesn't waste. That's good. Adrian needs someone like you. Her smile did not reach her eyes. Later, when I told Adrian how uncomfortable she made me feel, he sighed. She has trust issues. My father left when I was 4. She raised me alone. I believed him. I let sympathy silence my instincts. 3 months later, he proposed. We were at the same restaurant where we first had dinner. He knelt down, holding out a ring that sparkled like a promise. Lena, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Will you marry me? I said yes. And from that moment on, everything began to shift. Wedding planning became less about us and more about Marisol. She wanted to approve the flowers, the food, the guest list, the music. Adrian always defended her. My mom just wants the best for us. He'd say, she has experience. He'd add, he told me she used to be a school principal, but something in me wanted to verify. So I did. I called the school. No one there had ever heard of a principal named Marisol Hale. That was the first real crack. One evening, while we were sorting invitations, I asked Adrian, who from your family are we inviting? He shrugged. Just a couple distant relatives. They probably won't come anyway. Then, almost too quickly, but your aunt will come, right? The imaginary aunt. The lie that had grown legs and walked into my life. Both Adrian and Marisol asked about her more and more. Her age, her health, whether she planned to return to Seattle. Something inside me chilled. 1 week before the wedding, I came home early. I heard voices in the kitchen. Marisol's voice was cold. Time doesn't wait forever. Adrian. The aunt could come back anytime. Are the documents prepared? Yes, he whispered. We just need her signature. We'll act right after the wedding. My blood froze. My breath caught. They didn't know I was standing there. Marisol laughed quietly. Remember what happened last time. Don't repeat your mistakes. Last time. Mistakes. Another woman? Another property? I stepped back, pretending I had just walked in. The moment I opened the door, loudly, they changed their tone. Smiled. Pretended. But I had heard enough. They were waiting for one signature. Mine. On something involving the house I had worked years to build. And yet, I did not cancel the wedding. I needed time. I needed to know how deep this went. I needed to stay calm. Because revenge takes patience. The wedding itself was quiet, almost deceptively peaceful. We signed the papers, celebrated with a small reception, and everyone congratulated us like we were about to begin a beautiful life together. My parents were happy. Adrian smiled warmly at everyone. Marisol acted gracious and affectionate, especially toward my family. She complimented my mother's dress, praised the food, and spoke sweetly, too sweetly. But beneath every compliment was calculation. I remember one moment clearly. She turned to my mother and said, "It's admirable how Lena learned to stand on her own. She mentioned you have a beautiful home." My mother blinked, confused. "Oh no," my mother corrected gently. "I only have my 1-bedroom apartment." Marisol's smile froze for a brief second, like someone had pressed pause on her face. Then she recovered quickly and laughed it off. I must have misunderstood. So much information with weddings. You know how it is." But she looked at me. Just me. Her eyes said, "I see you. I know you're hiding something." Yet the wedding went on. People danced. Music played. And I smiled because I was now playing along. There was no honeymoon. Adrian said work was too busy. So he moved into my house, calling it our house, as if the word alone made it true. For the first week, he seemed perfect again, gentle, loving, attentive. He cooked breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, kissed me like he truly adored me. But slowly the shift returned. Late night calls on the balcony, whispered conversations with his mother, doors that clicked shut as I entered rooms. New, unopened folders hidden in drawers. The warmth he once gave so effortlessly now felt like something rehearsed, like a performance with lines he had memorized long ago. Then came the night that exposed everything. He arrived home early with flowers, chocolates, and a bottle of wine. He acted like we were celebrating something, although there was no occasion. We sat at the table, clinking glasses, laughing gently. I watched him, trying to decipher where the man I fell for had gone. Just when I thought he might say something emotional, there was a knock at the door. I already knew who it would be. Marisol stood there with a cake, smiling as though she were truly happy to see us. "Oh, I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. But of course, her timing was intentional. "Perfect timing, Mom," Adrian said, stepping aside to let her in. She put the cake on the table and immediately scanned the living room. My living room, with eyes that weren't admiring but evaluating. A young family should always plan ahead. She began, sitting like she owned the place. "Stability is important." I said nothing. I just waited. Adrian cleared his throat. "Lena, we've been talking," he began with a tone that sounded gentle, almost too gentle. "About our future." There it was. The move. The house. The paperwork. "What exactly do you mean?" I asked casually, sipping my wine. Adrian took my hand, squeezing it lightly. "I've been offered a job in Portland. Sales director. Higher pay. Better advantages. Long-term security." "And when did this happen?" I asked. He avoided my eyes. "Recently. I wanted to surprise you. It's a good opportunity. For both of us." I turned to Marisol. "And your part in this?" She smiled slowly. "My dear, I simply connected him with a close family friend who knows how to recognize potential. Don't you want your husband to succeed?" Husband, not partner, not equal. Husband, the owner, the decider. "I support ambition." I said, "But why make decisions about our lives without me?" "It's not a big deal," Adrian insisted. "You work remotely sometimes. You can relocate easily." Then came the final layer. "And besides," Marisol added, "you two will soon need a bigger place. Children require space." I set my glass down carefully. "We're not planning on children right now." The silence that followed was suffocating. Marisol's face tightened, her carefully controlled expression finally cracking. "No plans," she repeated sharply. "You're already 29. Do you think time waits for you? If you want a real family." "A real family?" I interrupted calmly. "What do you mean by real?" Her voice went cold. "A marriage without children isn't a marriage. It's just a temporary arrangement." I smiled. "So what you're saying is a woman's purpose is to produce children on command." Adrian held his hands up. "Lena, please, this isn't a fight." "It becomes a fight," I replied, "when decisions about my body are made without me." Marisol stood and grabbed her purse. "I've said what needed to be said. Good night." When she left, the air felt heavy. But Adrian didn't look angry. He looked calculating. "Let's not argue," he said, pulling me close. "We'll figure it out together." But the warmth in his voice was gone. Now, everything he said sounded like a performance. That night while he showered, I opened the closet to grab a blanket, but something caught my eye, a folder tucked behind his suitcase. Inside it were property transfer documents, signatures ready, only missing mine, deeds, wills, legal agreements, and photographs of other women, women older than me, women who owned homes, women who had something to lose. One of the names had a handwritten note, acquired, process completed. My hands shook, not from fear, but from clarity. This wasn't love. This was a pattern, a practiced, rehearsed, systematic hunt. He targeted women who could be manipulated into surrendering what they worked for. And now it was my turn. When I heard Adrian's footsteps coming down the hall, I quickly put everything back exactly as I found it. I smiled when he walked into the room. He smiled back, both of us pretending, both of us knowing, but only one of us realizing the other was no longer prey. Because now I wasn't afraid. I was focused. Revenge requires patience, precision, timing, and I had all three. I found Natalie at a small diner near the precinct the next morning. She slid into the booth across from me with that no-nonsense look she always had on duty, part sympathy, part steel. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "Tell me everything." I did. From the first lie about the apartment to the folder of deeds, and the whispered conversation I'd overheard. I told her about Marisol's casual questions at dinner and Adrian's odd friends at the farewell party. I told her how the house I'd proudly bought with years of sacrifice might already be scripted into someone else's plan. Natalie listened, pen poised. When I finished, she folded the napkin, leaned forward, and said, "Don't make any moves. Let me check records first. If there's anything on file, or if anyone's been designated as a beneficiary or power of attorney, I'll find it." I wanted to rush, to confront, to tear up the house and demand answers. But something steadier had taken root in me, strategy. If Adrian and Marisol were playing a long con, I had to become surgical, not emotional. Natalie called 2 days later. "There's no record of Marisol owning any of these properties," she said. "No transfers with her name. And no previous complaints about a Daniel, Adrian, Pierce, or Hale with patterns like this. But there are discrepancies. There's a law firm in Portland, Keller and Grimm, that shows a flurry of trust setups and property holds with unusual timing. They've handled transfers for older clients with sudden changes in beneficiaries. I'm going to put in some formal inquiries." Keller and Grimm. That was the name I'd heard in the kitchen that day. The same Keller Marisol had mentioned in casual conversation. My stomach tightened. The paper trail existed, but cleverly, like a spider constructing a web of placeholders and shell companies. Whoever had pulled these strings knew how to make transactions look legitimate. While Natalie worked, I began my own quiet surveillance. I watched Adrian's phone patterns. When he thought I was sleeping, I read lines of dialogue back to memory, searching for rehearsed cadences. I listened for the rustle of envelopes and the quiet clink of house keys when he returned late. I learned to spot a lie by the way it curved in his mouth. He started to change his routine. Late-night meetings turned into mid-morning departures. He'd take calls outside in the yard and return with a different expression, as if a role had been replaced. He tidied more often. He left printed documents on the dining table for later, documents he assumed I'd never touch. One evening, while he was in the shower, an urgent compulsion pushed me into action. I opened the drawer where he'd stashed the folder earlier. The physical documents had been removed, but not everything could disappear. In a slim notebook hidden beneath a stack of business cards, I found a list, names of properties, dates, initials, a small shorthand beside each, prep, delay, seal, and next to one property, the address of my house, was a notation I had seen before, a wait sign, post-wed. Post-wed. They had planned everything around the wedding. They had expected my signature as part of the performance. That realization clarified something else. This was never a random act of greed. It was meticulous. They had orchestrated a marriage to obtain legal leverage, then planned to execute the transfer while I was still dazzled by vows and cake. For a moment, I felt fury like a physical thing. Hot, sharp, stinging. The impulse to destroy, to confront, to scream, flared. Then I breathed. I called Natalie and asked for an immediate meeting. When we met, she had already coordinated with Keller and Grimm. They've been evasive, she said, sliding a printed piece of mail across the table. But they filed something odd last week. A proposed fee agreement that names Adrian as a contact for a number of trusts and an unsigned escrow instruction. Nothing's complete. No transfers finalized without the owner's signature. That's our window. Can they do anything without my signature? I asked, my voice small. Not legally, Natalie replied. But if you're married and your spouse signs certain documents, or if you're coerced into signing a power of attorney, it can become murky. They were counting on you to be overwhelmed. Honeymoon haze, exhaustion, trust. Once a signature's on the dotted line, undoing it is messy. So we need proof, I said. Proof they plotted this. Proof that Marisol knew and planned to take the house. Natalie nodded. And we need to remove the opportunity. If you stay silent and wait, they might try to push you into signing or to create a situation where your signature seems voluntary, but isn't. We'll draft a temporary injunction to block any transfer attempts. But for that, I need concrete evidence of intent, emails, recorded conversations, documents. Anything that shows a coordinated plan. I thought of the camera tucked behind a picture frame in the hallway that I'd bought years ago to feel safer. When I traveled, it had never been an espionage tool, just an old gadget to check on packages. But it had recorded snippets when I was out. Over the next few hours, I learned how to access it, rewound the footage, and listened with a detective's ear. There, blurred on the feed, were silhouettes in the kitchen 2 nights before the wedding. The audio was faint, but I could make out words after the vows. Signature, Keller. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was proof that 2 people were speaking about timing and legal steps concerning my property. Natalie filed an emergency petition. We asked the court for temporary relief, a restraining order against any transfer attempts, and an injunction preventing Keller and Grimm from accepting or acting on any instructions involving my name or my property. It was a legal long shot, but Natalie's reputation and careful crafting of the petition, backed by the footage and the notebook shorthand, made the judge listen. Within 48 hours, we had the temporary hold. Keller and Grimm received a certified letter noting the injunction and the pending inquiry. The move forced Marisol and Adrian to react. They could no longer proceed at their own pace. For the first time, they were on defense. Adrian's demeanor changed. The warmth thinned and hardened into anger. He accused me of betrayal, of spying, of betrayal of trust. He took the role of the wounded husband, gaslighting me with lines like, "You're making things worse," and "You're ruining opportunities for both of us." He used our friends, Margaret and the others, as support, painting me as paranoid. But the foundation of his story was cracking under proper paperwork. The real turning point came when Natalie confronted Keller and Grimm with a subpoena. The firm resisted, citing client confidentiality. But when the judge reviewed the evidence and the urgency, an ongoing scheme to transfer property, the court ordered them to produce records. Reluctantly, they complied. The documents were a map of greed. There were drafts of trust agreements, memoranda to Marisol advising on timing, and the soft approach with targets, a string of emails from a burner account that coordinated meetings and payments. There were also bank transfers, small ones from accounts tied to Adrian to shell companies. It was all there in black and white, the plan, the actors, the money trail. And in one email, a signature line read, M. Hale. In another, a draft agreement listed Adrian as the beneficiary upon transfer. We gave everything to the prosecutor assigned to the case. The response was swift. Criminal fraud and conspiracy charges were prepared. The prosecutor explained carefully that while marriages complicate property rights, what distinguished this case was the premeditation, emails, intentional timing, and the use of misrepresented identities to secure assets. This, she said solemnly, is exploitation. It's calculated, and it's criminal. When Adrian learned of the charges, he reacted exactly as someone who had long relied on a staged performance would, with bluster and attempt at charm. He cried out betrayal, saying his mother had merely been looking out for our future, and that I was the one seeking to ruin things. He tried to make the narrative about me being selfish. He told our friends that I had become ungrateful. He accused me of inventing evidence. But the emails were a problem. The bank transfers were a problem. The recorded snippet from my old camera was a problem. Evidence was a problem. Marisol, once so composed, started to unravel in the public glare. When the prosecutor requested her phone records, messages and calls filled in the gaps, calls to Keller and Grimm, instructions about timing, a call to a notary asking about backdated signatures. The image of the iron-faced matriarch cracked into something smaller, meaner, and very human. The trial process began. It was exhausting, humiliating in ways I'd never imagined. Newspapers picked up the story after the prosecutor filed charges. The local community that had once complimented our wedding now whispered. I received texts from old colleagues offering sympathy or pretending to be surprised. People I'd trusted distanced themselves to avoid association. But inside the courtroom, when I testified, when I described the overheard kitchen conversation and the note that had read post-wed, I felt no weakness. I felt the strange, clean clarity of someone who had been forced to make a choice and had chosen to fight. The defense tried every trick, painting me as unstable, suggesting the evidence had been planted, insinuating I had a motive to lie. But Natalie's careful documentation, the bank records, and the Keller and Grimm files formed an unassailable chain. The verdict came on a bright, ordinary morning, guilty on multiple counts of conspiracy and fraud. Adrian's face drained as the judge read the sentence. Years of combined prison time, a restitution order, and a mandatory removal from any position of fiduciary responsibility.